In the distant future, humanity had spread across the stars, exploring new planets and making homes in places once thought uninhabitable. One of these new homes was a lush planet called Terra Nova. This world was beautiful, filled with green forests, sparkling rivers, and strange creatures. But it was also home to the Corans, an alien race known for their strength and pride in battle. The Corans were tall and powerful, skin that shimmered like metal under the sun. They had a long history of fighting and conquering other species. They viewed themselves as the best warriors in the galaxy. When humans arrived on Terra Nova, the Corans were curious, but also looked down on them. They saw humans as weak and primitive, especially since they used simple weapons like bows and arrows. A human team, led by Officer Jake Miller, arrived to discuss peace and trade with the Corans. Jake was young but confident, believed that humanity could learn from the Corans and share knowledge in return. However, as they gathered for the first meeting, Jake felt the weight of the Corans' judgment. In a large hall filled with Coran leaders, Jake stood at the front, ready to speak. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, all directed at him and his team. The Corans were curious about the humans, but their curiosity quickly turned to mockery. Zorak, the Coran chief, stepped forward. He was massive, with muscles that rippled under his skin. He looked down at Jake with a sneer. "What kind of warrior are you?" Zorak laughed. "Come here with a bow? Do you think that is a weapon worthy of a fight? You're nothing but a child playing with toys." The other Corans roared with laughter, enjoying the show. Jake felt his face flush with embarrassment, but he stood tall. He knew he had to respond. "This bow may seem simple to you," Jake said, his voice steady, "but it requires skill and precision. I challenge any of you to a duel. If I lose, I will accept your judgment. But if I win, you must respect humanity." The room fell silent. The Corans exchanged glances, surprised by Jake's boldness. Zorak's eyes narrowed, intrigued by the challenge. "You think you can defeat a Coran warrior with that?" he asked, pointing to Jake's bow. "I will let you face Kalik, our greatest warrior. Now, he has never been defeated in battle. Prepare yourself." "For humiliation?" The crowd cheered, their excitement rising at the thought of a duel between their best warrior and the human. As Jake prepared for the duel, he felt a mix of fear and determination. He knew Kalik was strong, fast, and skilled in combat, but he also knew that he could use his intelligence to outsmart the warrior. Jake spent the next few days training, focusing on his archery skills and learning everything he could about Kalik. The day of the duel arrived, and the arena was filled with Corans. They were eager to see the human fail. Jake stood in the center, his heart pounding in his chest. He clutched his bow tightly, feeling the smooth wood against his fingers. Across from him stood Kalik, a tall figure with a fierce expression. He held a spear that glimmered in the sunlight, ready for battle. As the duel began, Kalik charged at Jake, moving with incredible speed. The crowd cheered, believing this would be a quick victory. Jake took a deep breath, focusing on Kalik's movements. He remembered his training and waited for the right moment to act. Kalik lunged forward, aiming his spear at Jake. In a split second, Jake sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the attack. With Kalik off balance, Jake seized the opportunity. He raised his bow and aimed carefully. He released the arrow, watching it soar through the air. The arrow struck Kalik in the shoulder, causing the Coran warrior to stumble back in shock. The crowd gasped, their laughter fading as they realized the human was not as weak as they had thought. Kalik, furious and wounded, glared at Jake. He charged again, but Jake was ready. He dodged and fired another arrow, this time hitting Kalik in the leg. Coran warrior growled in pain but continued to fight, his pride driving him forward. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were now worried, realizing their champion was in trouble. As the duel continued, Jake began to understand Kalik's fighting style. He noted the warrior's movements and patterns, learning how to anticipate the next attack. Kalik became more aggressive, but Jake remained calm. He used his bow not just as a weapon, but as a tool to control the distance between them. Every shot, Jake gained more confidence. The crowd watched in disbelief as the human continued to land hits on Kalik. The once boisterous arena was now filled with tension. Jake knew he could not let his guard down. Calic was still a fierce opponent, and he had to be careful. The warrior was determined not to let a human defeat him. With each passing moment, Calic grew more desperate. He charged at Jake again, this time with all his strength. Jake waited for the perfect moment and then quickly sidestepped, aimed his bow and released another arrow, striking Calic in the chest. The crowd gasped once more, and silence fell over the arena. Calic staggered back, his eyes wide with shock and pain. He had never faced such a fierce fight before. As he fell to the ground, the realization of defeat washed over him. Jake stood tall, breathless but proud. He had proven that humans were not to be underestimated. As the Corans processed the outcome, they began to understand the strength of the human spirit. Jake had not only fought bravely, but had also earned their respect. The duel had changed everything. Humans and Corans would have to find a way to coexist, and perhaps, together they could achieve greater things among the stars. As the dust settled from the duel, the atmosphere in the arena shifted dramatically. Corans, who had come to witness a simple spectacle of strength, were now faced with the reality that their greatest warrior had been defeated by a human. The cheers that once filled the air turned into murmurs of confusion and disbelief. Jake Miller stood in the center of the arena, his heart racing, feeling the weight of the moment. Zorak, the Coran chief, stepped forward, his expression a mix of anger and respect. He had not expected this outcome. He looked at Jake with narrowed eyes, trying to understand how a human had managed to defeat Calic. The silence in the arena felt heavy as everyone waited for Zorak to speak. "You have shown great skill, human," Zorak said slowly. "But this does not change the fact that you are still an outsider in our lands. You may have won this battle, but you have much to prove to earn our respect fully." The words hung in the air, and Jake felt a mixture of pride and concern. He knew he had won a battle, but the war for acceptance was far from over. After the duel, the Corans escorted Jake and his team to a large tent where they would stay during their visit. The tent was filled with strange decorations and glowing artifacts that showcased Coran culture. As they entered, Jake noticed his team was still buzzing with excitement. They had witnessed something incredible, and the news of Jake's victory would spread quickly. "That was amazing, Jake," shouted one of his team members, a young engineer named Mark. "You really showed them what we can do." The others nodded in agreement, their faces lit with enthusiasm. But Jake remained cautious. He knew that one victory did not mean acceptance. As night fell over Terra Nova, the Corans held a celebration in honor of Jake's victory. They wanted to show that they could accept defeat, even if it was hard for them. The celebration took place. Under the stars, with bright lights illuminating the night sky, our Corans danced and sang, their voices echoing through the trees. Jake felt a bit out of place, but decided to join in the festivities. He wanted to learn more about the Corans and their culture. He approached a group of Coran warriors who were sharing stories of past battles. They looked at him with curiosity, still unsure of how to treat the human who had defeated their champion. One of the warriors, a large Coran named Tarek, stepped forward.
"You fought well today, human.
But tell me, what do you know of honor? What do you know of battle?" Tarek's voice was deep, and he eyed Jake with a mixture of respect and challenge. Jake took a deep breath. "I know that honor is not just about winning. It is about how you fight and the reasons behind your actions. I've fought for my people to show that we can stand together as equals. Winning is important, but respect is what truly matters." Tarek nodded, seemingly impressed. "You speak wisely for a human. Perhaps you are not as foolish as we first thought." The other warriors listened, intrigued by Jake's words. This was a small step, but it felt significant. Jake could see the walls of prejudice beginning to crumble as the night went on. Jake learned more about Coran traditions and their views on combat. He listened carefully, asking questions and sharing stories from his own life. The Corans were amazed to hear about Earth's history, the struggles, and the triumphs of humanity. They began to see Jake not just as an outsider, but as someone who could bring new ideas and perspectives. The celebration lasted late into the night, And as Jake returned to his tent, he felt hopeful. He had taken a step toward building a bridge between their two worlds. However, he knew that there was still much to do. The next day, Jake would meet with Zorak and the other leaders to discuss the future of their relationship. He needed to prepare. The following morning, Jake woke early, sun shining brightly over Terra Nova. He gathered his thoughts, reflecting on the events of the previous day. He understood that while he had won the duel, he still needed to prove that humanity could be an ally to the Corans. He wanted to show them that cooperation was more powerful than conflict. As he arrived at the meeting place, he found Zorak and several other Coran leaders waiting for him. They were seated around a large table made of smooth stone, decorated with intricate carvings that told stories of their ancestors. Jake took a seat across from them, feeling the weight of their gazes. Zorak began the meeting. "You have earned our attention, human, but we must discuss what comes next. Your victory was impressive, but it has also brought questions. What do you seek from us? Why should we trust you?" Jake took a deep breath, knowing this was a crucial moment. "I seek friendship and cooperation. I believe that together we can learn from each other, can share technology, knowledge, and resources. By working together, we can become stronger and face challenges that threaten both our worlds."
Corans
Exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Jake felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Would they see the value in his words? Would they be willing to put aside their pride? After a moment of silence, Zorak spoke again. "Your words are bold, human. But trust is not given easily. Must show us your intentions are true. We'll allow you to stay and work with us, but know that we will be watching closely." Jake nodded, relieved, but aware of the challenge ahead. "Thank you, Zorak. I will do my best to prove that our intentions are genuine. I want to learn from you, just as you can learn from us." The meeting continued, and Jake discussed various ideas for collaboration. He proposed sharing agricultural techniques, medical advancements, and even cultural exchanges. The Corans listened, some nodding in agreement, while others remained skeptical as the day went on. Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to build a bridge between humans and Corans. He knew it would take time and effort, but he believed that through understanding and cooperation, they could create a better future together. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Jake watched as the Corans moved about, engaged in their daily activities. He realized that this was just the beginning of a long journey, one filled with challenges and opportunities. With each step forward, he hoped to pave the way for a new era of unity between their two worlds. Jake Miller woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose. The sun streamed through the thin fabric of his tent, and he could hear the sounds of the Coran camp bustling outside. Today was important. It was the day he would begin to show the Corans that humans could be valuable allies. He quickly dressed and stepped outside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he walked through the camp, he noticed the Corans moving with purpose. They were strong and focused, preparing for the day's tasks. Jake felt a mix of admiration and nervousness. He was still an outsider in their world, but he was determined to change that perception. He approached a group of Coran workers who were tending to plants in a small garden. "Good morning," Jake said, trying to sound friendly. The Corans looked up, their expressions curious but cautious. "I would like to learn about your agricultural practices. I think we can share ideas that could benefit both our people." One of the Corans, a female named Lyra, stepped forward. She had bright green skin and sharp features. "You wish to learn about our plants?" she asked, her voice steady. "Very few humans take an interest in our ways. Why should we share our knowledge with you?" Jake took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Because I believe that we can both grow stronger together. If we share what we know, we can improve our crops and food supply. This can help both our peoples survive and thrive." He smiled, hoping to show his sincerity. Lyra considered his words for a moment before nodding. "Very well, human. Follow me, and I will show you." She led Jake to the garden, explaining how the Corans grew their food. They used advanced techniques to cultivate plants that thrived in the unique soil of Terra Nova. Jake listened closely. Taking mental notes, he could see the pride Lyra had in her work, and he wanted to respect that. As they worked together, shared some of Earth's methods for farming. He talked about crop rotation and soil management. Lyra seemed intrigued, asking questions and offering insights from her own experiences. This exchange of ideas was encouraging. It felt like a small victory, a step toward building trust. Later, that day, Jake decided to visit the Koran training grounds. He wanted to learn more about their combat techniques and understand their warrior culture better. As he approached the area, he saw a group of Koran warriors practicing with their weapons. They moved with incredible speed and precision, their forms graceful yet powerful. Jake watched in awe as they demonstrated their skills. He noticed Kalik, the warrior he had defeated in the duel, training alongside them. Kalik seemed to have recovered from his injuries, and his fierce determination was clear. Jake felt a mix of respect and caution. He knew that Kalik would not forget their previous encounter. As Jake stepped closer, Kalik noticed him and paused. "You have come to watch us train, human?" he asked, his tone flat. "Are you wish to learn how to fight, or are you here to mock us again?" There was a hint of challenge in his voice. Jake raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not here to mock anyone. I want to understand your ways. Believe that knowing more about each other can help us build a better future together." Kalik studied Jake for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. If you wish to learn, then join us. But be warned, training is not easy." The other Korans looked at Jake with curiosity, some nodding in approval. Jake's heart raced as he stepped into the training area. He knew he would be tested, but he was ready to face the challenge. Kalik handed him a practice weapon, a wooden spear designed for training. "Hold it like this," Kalik instructed, demonstrating the correct grip and stance. Jake followed his lead, trying to mimic the warrior's posture. The other Korans watched him closely, some even smiling at his awkwardness. As the training session began, Jake found himself struggling to keep up with the Koran's speed and agility. They moved in sync, practicing various techniques and combinations. Jake felt out of place, but he pushed himself to learn. With each movement, he focused on their techniques, determined to improve. Kalik noticed Jake's effort and began to offer guidance. "You must be quicker," he said. "Use your body, not just your arms. Feel the rhythm of the movements." Jake listened carefully, trying to absorb every piece of advice. He was grateful for Kalik's help, even if their past was filled with tension. As the sun began to set, the training session came to an end. Jake was exhausted but proud of his progress. He had faced the challenge head-on and learned valuable lessons. The Korans had seen him struggle, but they had also seen his determination after training. Jake sat down with Kalik, who was wiping sweat from his brow. "You are not bad for a human," Kalik admitted. "You have strength in your spirit, but you still have much to learn." "I appreciate your honesty," Jake replied, smiling. "I know I have a long way to go, but I am willing to learn. If we can understand each other better, we can create a strong alliance." Kalik nodded, his expression softening. "Perhaps there is more to you than I first believed. I will help you, but you must be ready for the challenges ahead." Jake felt a sense of camaraderie forming between them, something he had not expected. As the days passed, Jake continued to train and learn from the Korans. He spent time working in the gardens with Lyra, training with Kalik, and engaging in discussions with other Koran leaders. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for friendship and understanding. One evening, during a communal meal, Jake shared stories about Earth's history with the Korans. He spoke of the struggles humanity had faced and how they had overcome them through unity and cooperation. The Korans listened intently, and Jake could see their interest growing. "Your history is filled with conflict," Zorik said thoughtfully, "but it is also filled with hope. Perhaps we can learn from your experiences." Jake smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Yes, we all have much to learn from each other. Our differences can be our strengths," as the meal continued. Laughter and conversation filled the air. Jake realized that he was no longer just an outsider. He was becoming part of something bigger, a connection between two worlds. The journey was still long, but each step forward brought them closer to a future built on understanding and respect. The days turned into weeks, and Jake Miller felt more at home among the Korans. He had built friendships with many of them, including Kalak, Lyra, and even Zorak. They had shared laughs, stories, and lessons, and Jake was grateful for the opportunity to learn from such a proud and strong people. However, he knew that challenges still lay ahead. One morning, as he trained with Kalak, he noticed that the atmosphere around the camp had changed. The Korans seemed more serious, their faces tense. Jake paused, sensing a shift in their mood. "What is happening?" he asked Kalak as they took a break from practice. Kalak wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at Jake with concern. "There have been rumors of other alien groups moving into our territory. They are not friendly, and they threaten our way of life. We must prepare for possible conflict." Jake's heart sank. He knew that conflict could destroy the trust they had built. "Is there anything we can do to stop this?" he asked, wanting. "To help?" Kalak nodded. "We must gather our warriors and prepare for any confrontation. But we also need to know more about these groups. Your knowledge of strategy could help us." Feeling a sense of urgency, Jake agreed to assist. They decided to hold a meeting with Zorak and the other leaders. The news of the potential threat needed to be addressed quickly. When they arrived at the meeting, Zorak was already present, his expression serious. "We have received reports of ships from a race called the Drakari. They are known for their aggression and conquest. We cannot let them invade our territory," he said, his voice firm. Jake listened carefully as Zorak outlined. "Their current situation? We need to scout their movements. We must understand how many ships they have, and how they plan to approach our territory," Zorak continued. Jake raised his hand. "I have experience with strategy and planning. I can help with scouting and gathering information. If we can learn their movements, we can prepare better for any conflict." Zorak looked at Jake, considering his words. "You have proven yourself in the past, human. If you believe you can help, then I will allow it." With the plan in place, Jake, Kalak, and a small team of Koran warriors set out to scout the area. They traveled to a high ridge that overlooked the surrounding lands. From their vantage point, they could see for miles, as they settled in to observe. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This was a chance to show the Korans that he could be a valuable ally. They watched for hours, scanning the horizon for any signs of the Drakari. Finally, just as the sun began to set, they spotted movement in the distance. A fleet of ships appeared on the horizon, their dark shapes cutting through the sky. Jake quickly took out his binoculars, focusing on the vessels. "There they are," he said, pointing at the ships. "It looks like they have a large number of them." Kalak looked through the binoculars, his expression serious. "We must count them and assess their strength. This is more than we expected." Jake nodded, noting the number of ships. "If they are planning to attack, we need to warn the others immediately." They quickly made their way back to the Koran camp, moving swiftly to avoid detection. When they arrived, they gathered the leaders to report their findings. "We have seen the Drakari fleet," Jake announced, his heart racing. "They have at least 20 ships, and they are well armed. We need to prepare for an attack." The atmosphere in the room shifted as the leaders processed the information. Zorak's face hardened. "We must fortify our defenses and prepare our warriors for battle. We cannot let them invade our home." Jake felt a sense of urgency. "Organize a strategy. If we can find a way to outsmart them, we can defend our territory without unnecessary bloodshed." The leaders began to discuss their options, and Jake offered suggestions based on Earth's military strategies. He talked about using the terrain to their advantage and setting up traps to slow down the Drakari forces. Impressed by Jake's knowledge, as the meeting continued, Kalak stepped forward. "We will train harder and prepare our best warriors for battle. We will not let the Drakari take our land." The Korans rallied around Kalak's words, their spirits lifting. They began to organize training sessions and strengthen their defenses. Jake felt a sense of pride in being part of this effort. Days turned into a blur of preparation. The Korans worked tirelessly, training their warriors and fortifying their camp. Jake joined them, helping to teach them new strategies and techniques. He felt a strong bond forming between him and the Korans, united in their goal to protect their home. As the threat of the Drakari loomed closer, Jake spent more time with Calic. They trained together, pushing each other to improve. Calic was a fierce opponent, but he respected Jake's determination. One evening, after a long day of training, Calic turned to Jake. "You have become strong, human. I see you fighting alongside us, not just as an ally, but as a brother." Jake smiled, grateful for Calic's words. "I am honored to fight with you. We are in this together." As the days passed, the tension grew. The Korans continued to prepare, and Jake felt the weight of their expectations. He knew that his actions could make a difference in the upcoming conflict, and he was determined to protect his new friends. Finally, the day of confrontation arrived. The sky was a deep shade of gray as the Koran warriors gathered, ready to defend their home. Jake stood among them, feeling nervous but resolute. He had trained hard, and he was ready to fight for the future of both humans and Wrens. As they waited for the Drakari to arrive, Jake looked around at the warriors standing beside him. They were strong and proud, and he felt a sense of unity among them. They were not just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for each other. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed in the distance. The Drakari ships had arrived. Korans braced themselves, ready for the battle that lay ahead. Jake felt a surge of adrenaline as he prepared for the fight. He knew that this was a crucial moment for both their peoples, and he was determined to stand strong. The ground shook as the Drakari ships landed nearby, their dark figures looming over the landscape. Jake took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. He was ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, standing side by side with his new friends. Together they would fight to protect their home. The air was tense as the Drakari ships landed on the outskirts of the Koran camp. The Korans gathered together, warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces set with determination. Jake Miller stood among them, feeling the weight of the moment. He had trained hard and built strong friendships with the Korans. And now it was time to put everything on the line. As the Drakari ships opened, a dark cloud of warriors poured out, their armor glinting in the weak light. They were tall and fierce, with sharp features and glowing eyes that seemed to reflect their aggression. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but he reminded himself that he was not alone. The Korans stood ready, and together they would face this threat. Zorak stepped forward, raising his voice to rally the warriors. "We will not let them take our home. We fight for our people, for our land, and for our future. Stand strong." The Korans roared in response, their battle cries echoing through the valley. Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. He had trained with these warriors, learned their ways, and now he was ready to fight alongside them. He looked at Calic, who stood beside him, his spear ready. "We can do this," Calic said, his voice steady. "Follow my lead and we will protect what is ours." As the Drakari advanced, the Korans formed a line, ready to defend their territory. Jake took a deep breath, focusing on the strategy they had discussed. He had suggested using the hills and trees to their advantage, creating obstacles for the Drakari forces. The Korans had listened. Now they were prepared. When the first wave of Drakari reached the Koran lines, the battle began. Jake watched. As Calic charged forward, his spear striking true, the Korans fought fiercely, using their skills and strength to push back the invaders. Jake joined the fight, using his bow to shoot arrows that found their marks in the chaos. The sounds of battle filled the air-clashing weapons, fierce shouts, and the cries of the wounded. The Korans fought with everything they had, and Jake felt a surge of energy as he moved among them. He aimed carefully, firing arrows at the Drakari warriors who threatened his new friends. He saw Calic fighting bravely, taking down one opponent after another, but the Drakari were relentless. They pushed forward, using their numbers to try to overwhelm the Korans. Jake noticed that some of the Korans were beginning to tire. He could see the determination in their eyes, but he also knew that they needed to regroup. "Fall back," Jake shouted, trying to be heard over the noise. "We need to create a stronger line." Calic nodded in agreement, and the Korans began to pull back slightly, forming a more solid defense. They moved together, creating a wall of strength against the advancing Dr. Akr. As they regrouped, Jake quickly glanced around, assessing the situation. He spotted a small hill nearby that could give them a height advantage. Hey, we should move. To that hill, he yelled, pointing. If we can get higher ground, we can shoot down on them. Kalik understood immediately. Follow Jake. Move to the hill. The Korans broke into a sprint, rushing toward the higher ground. Jake led the way, his heart pounding as he pushed himself to run faster. They reached the hill and quickly set up their positions, using the terrain to their advantage from their new vantage point. Jake and the Korans could see the battlefield clearly. The Drakari were still advancing, but now they were vulnerable. Jake took a deep breath and began to fire arrows again, aiming for the enemy's leaders and warriors. The Korans followed his lead, launching their own attacks from the hill. The tide of the battle began to shift. The Korans, now fighting from a position of strength, pushed back against the Drakari forces. They worked together, coordinating their attacks and using the hill to rain down arrows and spear throws. Jake felt a sense of hope as he saw the Drakari start to falter. Keep pushing, Kalik shouted, urging his fellow warriors. We can win this. The Korans rallied there, spirits lifted by the change in momentum. Jake continued to fire arrows, feeling the thrill of the fight and the rush of victory. But just as it seemed that the Korans were gaining the upper hand, a loud roar echoed through the battlefield. A massive Drakari warrior, much larger than the others, emerged from the chaos. He wielded a huge axe and charged toward the Koran lines, his eyes filled with fury. Jake's heart sank. We need to stop him, he yelled to Kalik. He could break our defenses. Kalik nodded, his expression serious. We must face him together. The two of them moved forward, ready to confront the giant warrior. The Korans around them cleared a path, allowing Kalik and Jake to face the formidable opponent. Massive Drakari warrior swung his axe, aiming for Kalik. With quick reflexes, Kalik dodged, but Jake could see that the Drakari was strong and fast. Aim for his legs, Jake shouted, trying to think quickly. If we can bring him down, we can defeat him. Kalik nodded, understanding the plan. He lunged forward, distracting the Drakari while Jake took aim. As Kalik engaged the giant, Jake focused all his energy. He drew back his bowstring, taking a deep breath to steady his aim. With a swift movement, he released the arrow, targeting the warrior's legs. The arrow struck true, hitting the giant in the knee. The Drakari roared in pain, stumbling slightly. Kalik seized the opportunity. He charged forward, using all his strength to strike the giant with his spear. The Drakari fell to one knee, but he was not done yet. He swung his axe wildly, trying to hit Kalik. Stay back, Jake shouted, firing another arrow at the giant. This time, it struck the Drakari in the shoulder, causing him to howl in anger. The Korans around them watched in awe as they witnessed the bravery of their warrior and the human fighting together. With one final push, Kalik lunged forward, driving his spear deep into the giant's chest. The Drakari warrior fell to the ground, defeated. The Korans erupted in cheers, their spirits lifting as they saw their enemy fall. Together, Jake and Kalik stood victorious over the fallen warrior. The Korans rallied around them, feeling a renewed sense of strength. They pushed forward, taking advantage of the chaos created by the fall of their leader. The Drakari forces began to retreat, realizing they were losing the battle. As the tide turned, Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had fought hard, and now it seemed that victory was within their grasp. The Korans pressed on, driving the Drakari back and securing their territory. When the battle finally came to an end, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the field. The Korans stood together, breathing heavily but filled with pride. They had defended their home, and Jake had proven himself a true ally. Zorak approached Jake and Kalik, a proud smile on his face. You have both shown great courage today. We are grateful for your strength, human. You have earned our respect. Smiled back, feeling a sense of belonging. We fought together as one. This victory is for all of us. As the Korans celebrated their hard-fought victory, Jake realized that they had forged a bond that would last. They were no longer just allies. they were friends. Together, they had faced a great challenge and emerged stronger. With the sun setting, in the distance, Jake felt a sense of hope for the future. They had fought for their home, and now they could work together to build a new beginning, united as one people. The journey ahead was still long, but with trust and cooperation, they could face whatever came next.